So if you're familiar with Z-spheres, you can kind of just fast forward until, I don't know, the 3 or 4 minute mark probably. I'm actually doing this a bit backwards too. I did want to show how I started this model, but there will be a small jump in the middle because I actually did the first 15 minutes of this on a different machine and I wasn't recording. I didn't decide I wanted to record this until about 20 minutes in. But I did want to touch base on how I created my base mesh. I always hate when people do videos and they skip important sections and stuff. So if you're familiar with Z-spheres, you can just kind of fast forward for a few minutes. I have to admit I did hate Z-spheres for a long time. And it just was really difficult for me to get used to working with them. But once I got used to it, I really appreciated the fact that I could build things so quickly. I'm just kind of going through an example of how I would block out this particular character. This isn't the exact one, this is just kind of an example of me using Z-spheres a little bit and how I navigate. The cool thing about Z-spheres is it's an armature and you can do anything with it, which is really, really powerful. I mean, because for the most part, I laugh all the time at some of the models I see on ZBrush Central and all these other sites, and it's like it starts off as a cube and then it ends up being like this amazing Predator head or Iron Man model or something. And I mean, it does not matter at all almost what your mesh looks like. So sitting in Maya or Modo or something for even 45 minutes and trying to block something out is pretty ridiculous, you know. Like with this guy, if I just want to add some ears really quick, you know, I can kind of, you know, pull these out. Okay, now I've kind of got some horns and ears going, and it's just a really, really efficient way to work. And it's not so much a matter of hating modeling in Maya or Max is better or Silo is this or that. It's faster than all of them, so it doesn't really matter. This is just an example how you can really quickly block out shapes. And the cool thing is if I want to go back and I decide I don't like this, you know, that's certainly not a problem at all. You can go back and delete Z-spheres really easily. This guy's got a huge booty. I don't know why, but let's give him a tail or something here really quick. There we go. Amazing. World's greatest Z-sphere model complete. Booyah. Amazing. As silly as that is, though, it's a great starting point. So this is about 15 minutes in, and we'll just start the sculpting process now. All I did was I imported a couple spheres for eye placement, which is something I like to do in the beginning. And then I typically kind of just do a bit of blocking, you know. And the one thing I'm going to keep in this video is any mistakes I make or kind of undos, I just keep in there because I don't like when people do videos and it always appears like everything goes perfect because it's just not how it is. And this model I'm doing in particular is kind of a creature character concept just out of my head. And so I don't really know what I want anyway. So I'm going to be doing a lot of undos. I'm going to be not liking certain strokes that I make, and I might, you know, go back and change the head shape and do different things, which I think is pretty beneficial because, you know, a lot of the videos out here get edited really heavily, and it's pretty intimidating, especially in the beginning. I mean, it's not to me now because I'm aware how edited these are. I've written books and I've done DVDs and stuff, and they are quite edited. But you know, even the guys that are really seasoned, you know, everyone makes mistakes, and everyone kind of goes, oh crap, and they undo 70 times and gets back to a different point and starts over, and it's pretty common. I'm just kind of blocking my basic shapes out. Some people, especially in Mudbox, I notice a lot of guys in the Mudbox community really kind of tend to jack up the mesh really, really high now, it seems like. Mudbox can do some phenomenal mesh counts. And so they'll bring the mesh way high and really sculpt high detail right away, which is fine. I've seen people do some amazing stuff that way. I don't have any problem with that at all. Me personally, I tend to block out around level 4. Really basic shapes, and I almost live and die with the clay brush. I almost don't use anything else. I use clay and the standard brush, and then I'll flip-flop with pinch kind of once I get towards level 6, level 7, and I'm really finalizing my mesh. It's important to get the eyes in the beginning, I think, just for placement, even if they're kind of you know, like this guy, it still looks ridiculous and his eyes are bulging out of his head, but it does give you an idea for placement. I don't tend to model them as part of the mesh. I like keeping them separate. It just gives you something to sculpt around. I tend to get my eyes done faster, I think, if I have an eyeball I'm sculpting around. And plus I think it's more accurate because I know it's round. A lot of guys do eyeballs, but they don't actually, it's kind of not actually round. They're just kind of guessing, you know. Yeah, I'm just kind of messing with the mouth a little bit. I'm not exactly sure what expression I want, or how I want his face to feel yet. There may be parts in this where I'm not talking to, by the way. This will be about an hour-long video. The entire sculpt was 2 hours and 4 minutes, I think, start to finish. And I'm only speeding it up 2 times. That way everyone can see most of my strokes for the most part. Initially, I just try to do as many big folds as I can. I know there's going to be folds over and under his eye, right here around the neck. I'm going to hit those, at least blocking them out a little bit. And, you know, I might go back and erase some of this, but I kind of like getting a feel for, well, if his neck were bent this way, you know, how does that work for him? You know, where does his skin crease and fold? And, you know, we'll definitely talk about skin folding and creasing in a little bit after I step up another level or two. It's just something I think people not overlook, but people kind of tend to do it in the beginning wrong, I think, and skin doesn't look realistic the way it folds and stuff. But there's pretty easy ways to kind of fix that. This guy's horns, I have no idea what I'm going to do with these things. These are... At this point, I have no idea. I just know I want him to have kind of big, beefy horns, and I don't know if they're going to curl or if they're going to be broken off at the ends. No idea. So I'll probably go back and mess with those off and on. I tend to avoid areas too. Like most artists, I think I'll sculpt all over the place and avoid the one area I don't want to do, like an ear or like a hand or something. But it's always good to save. And this is just kind of concepting stuff because I don't really know how I want his horns to look. I don't, you know, do I want them splintered at the edges? And so I'm just kind of making strokes and seeing how it feels. The nice thing too at this point is, you know, for me, I'll try to work kind of quick and not be obsessed with every little move. I end up finding all the time that I make a lot of happy accidents that way, which is pretty good. You know, most of the shapes and wrinkles I end up coming up with are a result of me kind of moving quickly and blocking things out, and I'll accidentally put a line somewhere and think that it looks pretty good. And then I'll just kind of extrapolate on that and go, oh, that actually isn't too bad, and then I'll kind of make it look legit, but in the beginning it's pretty rough and pretty ugly. I don't really like the way his horns were shaped, so I'm just trying to put a little more curve on them. Most important shapes for me at this level are definitely silhouette and then basic facial expressions. You know, I kind of feel like I have it blocked out a little bit right now. So, you know, we're stepping up a little bit, and then it's just a matter of retouching. Every time I step up, I'll retouch a little bit. And we won't take the eyes to the next level really yet until we step up again. A lot of people do eyes kind of not the best way. They just kind of plug a hole in their character's head and they just fold everything around it. But people don't do eyelids very often. I don't know why. I don't know if it's hard and they avoid it. But I definitely see a lot of models where, You know, they just kind of shove an eye into a hole and they kind of mold the brow over the whole eyelid. But that's actually their eyebrow coming down over the eye, and it's not their eyelid coming over the eye. And I don't obsess over it on this model, but I do definitely go out of my way to give them at least some semblance of an eyelid, because I think that's pretty important. The thing is, though, you do have to wait till you get to a much higher subdivision level, like I think 6 or 7, at least on this model. Prior to that, I'm just kind of blocking it out. And this now, I'm trying to just kind of figure out, like, well, where is his brow start and end? You know, if he's furrowing his brow, does it really come towards the center of his head, or is it kind of more close to the eye? Where are his major skin folds and stuff like that? Just trying to block out all the major shapes, hitting the jaw. I do tend to model really erratic too, so I'll just kind of touch everything. That's probably not erratic. I suppose it's an okay way to work, but I don't like sit and get an eye looking really good and then do a nose and get it looking really good. I just kind of keep massaging the entire mesh the whole time that I'm doing it. And here now I haven't done an eyelid yet, but I am trying to get kind of the feel for, like, you know, how much eye do I want to show? You know, I'm also concerned about things like, well, what is his view? You know, how does he see things? Is he front facing? Does he see like a horse where he doesn't see anything in front of him and he sees things off to the side? A lot of that makes a difference to me. And there's other things to consider too if you really get into it. You know, predators tend to have eyes in the front of their head. Non-predatory animals tend to have eyes in the side of their head, stuff like that. So you can like dive into this stuff and get really into anatomy books and get pretty gnarly with this stuff if you really want. But kind of once you know a few of the little tricks and details, you kind of know most of it. I'm actually using the standard brush now. I'm a little bit higher in my mesh count now, and I can kind of use it to make some creases to kind of block out shapes that I like in lines. And a lot of time it's just really basic line work. And I still kind of have no idea what I want to do with the horns at this point. I kind of feel like I want a ridge on top, almost like a blade. Of course, it's nicked up from years of use and stuff. And now I'm thinking I'll just cut that in, and I hate that, so I'm going to undo all that. And here I'm just struggling. I don't know what detail to put in the center of his face. So I made a couple strokes and now I'm just abandoning it. I'll go back to it when I can come up with something. I don't like sitting and dwelling on something if I can't figure it out. I'll work on something that I'm happy with. So this is me just trying to figure out a couple shapes. You know, I'm trying a few wrinkles in the center of his head. I'm not in love with it, so I'm just kind of moving on. But I don't even undo it because I can always just smooth that out or just keep it. And that slowly becomes kind of that accidental shape thing. You know, I don't have to undo everything I'm not particularly happy with. And now I'm back to the clay brush, which I love the clay brush. I actually originally started with Mudbox, and I do love Mudbox. And I think the more current version of Mudbox is pretty nice. They have a nice clay brush now. However, at the time I was struggling to find a brush like the clay brush. When I picked up ZBrush 3, it nailed exactly what I wanted. So I've been using ZBrush since then. And this is me now kind of just trying to figure out, well, what do I want the front part of his horn to look like? Because then it kind of looked too much like a cow first. And I don't really want it to look like a cow. Even though he's cow-ish, and I named my character Cow. And the video's called Cow. in this, I'm perfectly happy to have lots and lots of imperfections in this because it's a really organic shape and it's really worn. And it is coming off the head too much right now, and I'll blend that in later. So now I'm kind of thinking about fat in the face. You know, I've got the silhouette and the proportions kind of exist, but now I want to fill out, well, if he was making this expression, where is his muscles? Where are his muscles pulling? Where is fat building up? At the corner of the mouth, under the chin, around the nose, things like that. You know, it's important to think about where are things hanging on a character. Where is all of his weight? You know, like he has a huge horn on his head. His neck would be amazingly powerful and strong, so he should have a really strong looking neck. I don't know if they call it a sternocleidomastoid on animals or not, but you know, the tendons that run from your ear to your front clavicles, you know, that would have to, whatever they call it on animals, I don't actually know. But on humans, that's what it's called. And it would have to be a very, you know, really, really powerful set of muscles and tendons back there. So, you know, people don't always think about that stuff. They just think, well, I'm just going to make a neck, and they don't consider that he's got a, you know, 70-pound horn on top of his head. In most people, I would just say, oh, you're doing kind of a cow or a quadruped creature. Go get an anatomy book and, you know, find something that resembles the body type you're trying to do and just kind of imitate that and stuff. And I do that if I'm doing a full character or something. But this, and with faces, I feel comfortable enough that I can just kind of work off my imagination, and it's believable enough. You know, it's not National Geographic after all. This thing's not outside walking around, so I can get away with a little bit. And as long as I'm accurate enough, then I think it's okay. Now, a lot of the things I'm doing right now, I'm just doing for the sake of blocking. I know I want fat underneath his horn here, so I'm blocking out some of those shapes with tubes and stuff, and you can see me do it under his jaw here as well. The thing is, people do skin folds so wrong all the time. It's frustrating. I do it like this initially, but I go back and I fix it later. People tend to just make tubes. You know, they use the standard brush and they run it across their character wherever they want wrinkles, and it just ends up looking like little tubes and worms all over their character. And it's not really what wrinkles are. Wrinkles aren't always just a tube shooting across your character. It should kind of have a high side and a low side most of the time, unless you're dealing with like cloth or something. But I tend to find wrinkles looking much more realistic if you have a high side to your wrinkle and then a low side. And the low side is kind of what actually causes that wrinkle. It's not that you have a tube coming off of the surface of your character. It just doesn't look right. And I have a lot of that going on right now, and you can see that it does look bad. It does not look accurate. Like the back of his neck here looks kind of beefy and silly, and it just doesn't look realistic. But that's something that I go back and fix later on because I know. But the way I'm doing it now, it's good for me because it's blocking it out. So he's got this massive, ridiculous neck. I'm just making some proportion adjustments here. I try to do as many full characters as I can. It's certainly easier for me to do busts. I mean, this was a 2-hour piece for me by the time I finished up. Maybe 2.5 by the time I Z-sphered it, I guess. He's kind of starting to look okay right now. I don't like this line underneath his neck. It's just not accurate. He would have really strong chest muscles. If you've ever seen, and I did grow up with horses and stuff, and cows and whatever, they have actually really, really aggressive, heavy set, not pectorals, but breast muscles. They're pretty prominent, especially on males. But that stuff you should find out, you know, as you're doing this stuff and you're researching it, you would see that in anatomy books and stuff. I'm actually surprised a lot of times. I see people, some videos on YouTube and wherever, they do a lot of, they do quite a lot of standard brush. Man, I cannot use the standard brush. I mean, I use it sparingly at best. If I have to make a prominent indentation, then I'll use it. Or if I have to pull up a line, I'll use it. But otherwise, to me, it's just an unusable brush, which is funny because some people just can go to town on it, go to town with it, and make amazing characters. Ian Joyner, my buddy, who I mentioned earlier, I've watched him work many times, and man, he'll just use the standard brush all day for his whole character. And then I know other people, you know, they just use the most aggressive, heavy brush possible, like Ram, which I've never used Ram in my life, and they love it. It's funny. So this is what I'm talking about, the high side and low side. Like it used to be a tube, essentially, and then I kind of filled in that one side, so it's kind of like skin meeting up against another bit of skin instead of two tubes next to each other. And I'll go refine that more in a little bit as well, but I still have no idea what I want to do with the horn at this point. So I'm just nicking it up and kind of concepting it a bit. The industry's going through a lot of really cool changes right now with modelers becoming concept artists. I mean, it's genuinely a legitimate renaissance within the art community that just didn't exist 5 years ago. It used to be that you got a concept artist and he painted something and he gave it to a modeler and the modeler modeled it, and you know, you wouldn't know what you had for days, and you'd have to sit there and, you know, noodle it forever, and then someone would come in and tell you to move an eye, and it was like this big deal. And now I can sit down and off the top of my head in 2 hours really, I mean, flesh out a character almost to finish in a matter of hours. And it doesn't involve a concept artist. It just involves me sitting down and coming up with something, or having some notes from a director, or maybe a really loose scribble of something. But it's great, you know. I don't know what I want this horn to end up looking like. I'm not particularly happy with it right now. I don't necessarily even like these lines I'm putting in it, but I don't know. We'll see. I'll come up with something eventually, hopefully. So I'm just going to go ahead and smooth again. We're at another level now, which is good. Now I can kind of go in and make these fatty pockets and details in the face kind of a little more prominent. And I just do that with, see, now I'm actually using the standard brush. So I'm just going to go kind of hit all my creases a little bit, and really drive the wrinkles in a little bit more. I'm still leaving the eye alone for the most part. I'm happy with the silhouette. You know, the actual eye that I'm leaving visible, I'm happy with that. But I don't have enough geo yet to do an eyelid, so I'm just kind of leaving it to the next level. There's not too much I can do until I have the geo for it, so I'll just leave it until then. You know, at this point though, you know, some of the stuff I've figured out, which I'm happy with, you know, I've decided, okay, I do like that his brow kind of ends here. You know, I was kind of toying with the idea initially, like, well, maybe his kind of brow line came all the way across the bridge of his nose, and I'm happy with it here. I've settled on it, so I think it's okay. The nose, I'm still kind of not sure about. It's really wide. It's much more wide than I think I intended, but I'm okay with it for now. The front of the nose is giving me a little bit of trouble. I'm just kind of trying to figure out how much wrinkle do I put in the front, the side, and the top of his head. And around his eye, I think are going to have a lot of expression and wrinkles. But the front of the nose so far is pretty flat, and I haven't really decided how much I want to put in the front. I do have a little more geometry now. I'm just going to flesh out the eye just a bit more, maybe. The nice thing about the clay brush is it's really forgiving. I can just use it and not worry that it's making these aggressive lines all over my mesh. Because when you go over something continually, it builds up the lower area. It doesn't necessarily just take the existing areas and just raise it all the way up to a point where it's really unforgiving. Definitely need to do something with his mouth. It's getting a little too cartoony. It's too long. I don't think his mouth would be that long. I think if it was smaller, it would be a little more masculine, a little more kind of aggressive. I never really settle on my shapes. I'll move stuff around right before I decide I'm done. I mean, all the way to the last minute. I'll go back to level 2 and move stuff around. In fact, I encourage it. I think people settle on stuff, myself included. I'll get to a point with a model and I'll just settle on it and go, okay, well, this is my model. I'm going to sculpt on it. And then I get to level 6 or 7, and I think it's great to just kind of go and really move his face around and see if you can come up with something completely different at the very end, which I do a lot, and I'm often surprised at how well it turns out. It's nice that you're able to make those big aggressive changes, even at the very end of a project. I still don't know what I want to do with the horn. I'm just kind of thinking about a few things. And now I'm just going to abandon it again. Maybe sharpen this up a little bit. I'm just kind of going over the whole mesh with the pinch brush. If you're wondering what I'm doing, just hitting certain creases, and particularly on the horn and kind of the rim of the nose. The rim of the nose got a little bit too tight for me. I was too aggressive with the pinch. I should soften that up a bit. I'm not really intending him to be particularly stylized, where he's got a hard, too aggressive on the edges where it's really hard surface stuff. I'd like to kind of sit and noodle on the eye a little bit now. And I'm trying to do this without adding geo. I'm trying to see if I can block in an eyelid. I pretty much do all my eyelids always. I always do my eyes the same way. I kind of just plunk a hole in the middle of the mesh, and I get my eyeball in there, and then I go in and do a lid after the fact. I'm subdividing now because I know I kind of want to get a feel for how the eyelid works. And even just that from a distance sells quite a lot better. It just looks more realistic. It looks more professional. And again, you see, I didn't just like make a line and then just say, okay, I'm done. I made a line, but then I built up one side because that's that high side, low side that I'm talking about. And I don't have a million polygons to deal with here around the eye, but I can kind of block it out. And then it's a good idea, I'll take the actual eyelid itself and kind of pull it down around the eye. And, you can keep doing this to the nth degree, if I subdivided a couple more times, which I could do. I wouldn't on this mesh in particular until I resurfaced it. because I would want to focus geometry around the eye, and then I would just reproject everything. But I have enough geo now where I can kind of block out kind of some of the eye wrinkles and go in here and really kind of start hitting all these fat pockets and stuff with a little more intention. So now I'm back to the standard brush. Almost everything up to this point has been clay brush, with the exception of a few times I'll go back and pinch things and maybe use the standard brush to do some line work, but I'm going to go, just like every other level, I'm going to go with the standard brush now and kind of hit all the line work again. I'm not really in love with the side of his face. He's got a couple little wrinkles and stuff going on that just are anatomically don't make any sense. I'm already aware of that, and I'm going to kind of soften a few of them up in a little bit. I do get a lot of spottiness in ZBrush 3.5. I think I get more in 3.5 than I did in 3. I don't know why. I mean, I really can't move fast with the standard brush. And this mesh at this point maybe has like 600,000 polys or something. It's not particularly heavy. I think it ends up at 2 million. Here it's probably 600,000, and even at 600,000, if I move too quick with the standard brush, it does get spotty, and I don't know why. I don't want to use the lazy brush, trick or anything. I just would like for it to work. But especially when you watch Mudbox videos and these guys are at, 50 million polygons and just like sculpting away. A lot of times too, you might not be able to tell what I'm doing, but I'm making strokes and then immediately hitting shift and continuing my movement, and I'm building up and then softening and then building up and softening. And I'll do that depending on what I'm working on. If it's skin, the top part of a wrinkle or something, I don't want it to be pointy, so I'll build it up and then soften it. The mouth is still really loose, so I do need to spend a minute and probably get this defined a little bit. And the front of his lips are too far apart. It just doesn't look right. It's, his mouth is kind of open, but not. If it were this open, we would see teeth or something. Definitely need to do something with his mouth. It's just doesn't look that good. I mean, the shape's kind of there, but it's just kind of lumpy and it's not really working. I need to bring these together, and that's not at all what I wanted. I'm just going to mask the upper lip so I can kind of bring the lower lip up into it a little more. And my mask isn't working very well for some reason. It's like fading after a few strokes. And I'm thinking I should probably soften my mask. There you go. That's a little better. Here's a couple angles like this that people don't hit very often with organic shapes. They'll do the front, the side, the kind of 3/4, but you should really look at, especially mouths and heads. A lot of times heads look great, and then you look at them from kind of an upper balcony view, and they come to a point, you know, like a wedge, and it's it's not the right shape head at all. Still not in love with the lip, and I'm not sure why. I'm just kind of noodling, trying to see if I can come up with something. I like the chin. I like the little kind of butt chin. This is kind of one of those, I don't know if it's a happy accident or not, but you know, it kind of changed what I was going to do. You know, I just had 2 accidental lines over his head, and I ended up thinking, oh, that kind of looks believable. So I kept him, and in fact went and accentuated them to kind of make it a feature. But I would never have done that had I been moving slower and really thought about every single tiny little stroke I was doing. And this, I'm just struggling on the underside of the nose because I'm making strokes and I'm okay with it, but it's not connecting right to his labial folds that go around the nostrils. So I'm just kind of abandoning it. And these wrinkles under here are still incredibly loose. You know, they're a bit lumpy, there's just kind of tubey. They don't really look that good. But for me, I know what their intention is, so I can make sure I go fix that at the end. And then there's the horns, which I have no idea what I want to do. I don't like the tips. I kind of wanted them to come to a point, but they don't. And there's no real super easy way for me to make a nice smooth, bring these into a nice point. So I'm just kind of thinking here, like, well, what if I just flattened them a bit, like they were broken off? Nah, not really in love with that. And as usual, I'll just abandon it altogether and do something else. I don't like to sit and spin my wheels too long. If I do, I'll just move on immediately. You know, the horns aren't going anywhere. I can always fix those. Yeah, I'm not really in love with this either. I'm kind of accentuating the rim around the horn. I'm aware that I'm going to go back and break that up again. For now, it's okay. It gives it some nice lift and, you know, a nice little ridge. But it's definitely not what I want to end up with. So I'm just kind of hitting the horns with rub marks and, you know, dents and nicks and stuff. Most of the models I do too, I kind of have, you know, my own personal opinion of doing really high frequency detailed sculpts is, you know, I'm a bit indifferent. I can appreciate the effort that it takes to kind of go in and do skin detail sculpting, but if you've ever worked in the industry, you don't ever, I've never had to do that for for any project ever. For film or television or games or anything. I mean, bump maps do exist. You can use normal maps and bump maps and displacement maps, and you know, there's lots of little tricks. I mean, you're not that often putting a camera on the surface of someone's face. So you know, while I appreciate the exercise in doing it, it's actually not particularly useful. I mean, even when I was working on Terminator and we were doing all the hero shots for the main character, you know, that was, even the skull was actually ZBrushed. It wasn't hand modeled. Even for that and the main character, you know, we just kind of blocked out the face shapes and the muscles on the character and stuff, and we did a little bit of detailing around like the burn marks and stuff, but that was all Julian Sarmiento's work. He's a really talented sculptor. He did a lot of nice work on that show. He pretty much owned the head that we did at Asylum Visual Effects for that. He did some nice stuff. Nice guy too. And this is me just going back and breaking up that edge. You know, I put that edge there intentionally, and now I'm breaking it up. And actually, I'm using the polish brush, which I actually like the polish brush quite a lot. It creates a really... it's hard to explain what it's doing exactly. It is flattening surfaces, but it has like a tolerance. It has like a threshold. It prefers certain areas to stay flat and other areas to stay pinched. And so if it starts nearing an edge, it'll kind of crease it, and everything else around it will kind of flatten out. So you can get some really nice kind of like chipped metal and like chipped bone kind of looks with it, which is great. So, you know, I'm at this point, this is probably the first point where I can pan out and go, okay, I'm kind of happy with the direction. I think for me, I don't know about most modelers, but for me, I pretty much hate my model until about 80%. And then once it's at 80%, I'm kind of like, okay, I guess this might actually turn out like something I can show people. Because before that, it's, you know, you hate everything, and every little thing is like, yeah, it's not working out, and why is my brush body... Funny thing about ZBrush too is I hate ZBrush. As much as I love it, I hate it. I think it's just ridiculous. It just does stuff that's so annoying and difficult. But because of that, I use like 2% of the program. I mean, ZBrush is a pretty big application, and I pretty much open it up. I know how to open a file, and then I use clay, pinch, and standard, and that's just about it. And then I export it. I don't stick around in ZBrush for too much. If I can stay out of it, I stay out of it. They do some amazing stuff, but at the same time, it's definitely got a learning curve to it. Especially if you've gone from an application like Mudbox. Oh my God. If you go from Mudbox to ZBrush, it makes you want to blow your head off. The first time I used Mudbox, that day I did a model, and that weekend I did 3 models. I have all of those on my blog and on my website. And I did, 3 pretty good, especially good first-time sculpts in that application. And I was only able to do that because of how easy it is. I mean, it was like opening up Photoshop. It's like, oh, you've got like 4 or 5 tools, and you've got a viewport, and there you go, done. ZBrush, I mean, it took me a day or 2 to open a file when it first came out. It's not as bad now because you have YouTube and all these other resources with ZBrush Central, but my God, when this thing first launched, couldn't open a file. You have to. I was like, load a tool. Why am I loading a tool? Why can't I just open a ZBrush file? Nope, can't do it. And then even if you get something in, you keep making brush strokes, and it just keeps spitting out more Z tools, and you're like, why is it duplicating my character? I didn't ask it to do. I didn't hit Control D. And then the navigation. I'm sorry. All navigation should just have the option of being Maya navigation. It just should. I have no idea what I'm doing with the nose. I don't like this. It's not coming out well. This second wrinkle I'm putting around the nostril, I'm not liking. And I'm not liking how it's connecting to his labial fold or going around the nose. I don't like that at all. But that's a nice thing is I can kind of concept it here and hopefully come up with something that I like. Which is not happening. And this is me trying to use the standard brush just for a few minutes, and it's driving me nuts. I mean, if after every single stroke you have to do a smooth, you're kind of doubling your work, and you should consider maybe that you're using the wrong tool. You shouldn't have to smooth that often. You should be able to build up your mesh and subtract, not subtract, but push in geo and not have to smooth constantly. That's my brush being really spotty. I don't understand why it's doing that, but it's definitely been happening since I got 3.5. So this, I'm just kind of following that original line I made, but not connecting it to the labial fold, and I'll just kind of leave it for now. His nose is okay, but it's a little bit flat actually on the outside. I'm trying to just kind of inflate it up a bit. I mean, I don't necessarily want it bigger. He's definitely he definitely has a big nose, but it's a little too right angled for me. So now I'm actually using the inflate brush here a little bit. I just touched the nose with it briefly, and I kind of liked the result I got, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll kind of go inflate some areas. So I'm just kind of hitting the eye and some of the fatty areas. Inflate works pretty good for that. And this is me concepting, I don't know where I want to put wrinkles, so I'm just making lines and seeing if anything sounds good. And then, I had a happy accident. I made a line near the lip, and I was like, oh, let me maybe consider doing a more prominent upper lip, and everything I did just ended up looking kind of stupid, so consider that officially abandoned. But that's a nice thing about ZBrush, right? I was like, oh, what about a prominent lip? Nope, it sucks. Okay, moving on. And this area I wasn't even happy with, 2 subdivision levels ago. It doesn't really work great. I'm probably going to want to go fill that hole in a little bit under his cheek. I mean, even at this point, and I'm, not that far into a sculpt, I'm, an hour and a half in maybe. And, for the most part, it's done. It's at a point where you could show an art director or a director and go, is this at all what you want? And it's only been an hour and change, which is pretty amazing. It's actually more than amazing. It's miraculous that you could sit and do this kind of thing on a lunch break and show somebody something and go, oh, how's this look? The thing is, though, you always have to take things with a grain of salt. I mean, first of all, artists are compulsive liars. Every single post on ZBrush Central is an artist saying, "Hey, I just did this really quick," and they use words like "really quick" or "just for fun," and it's always implied that it just, I was kind of not really caring, and I just whipped this up really quick. Let me tell you something. Artists don't spend time doing screenshots and photoshopping their stuff and putting their name on it and putting it on their website to post on ZBrush Central unless they spent some time on it and thought it looked okay when they were done. It's just the way it is. But everyone likes to kind of imply that, I was just doodling and building a house with my other hand at the same time. It's nonsense. Artists care about what they're doing and they spend a lot of time doing it. But the caveat to all of this is, I can do this kind of character quickly because I'm doing it for myself. And I can just do it and go, okay, I'm happy with that. When you start doing something from a concept, it changes everything dramatically. And, it's actually pretty difficult to sculpt to a concept in ZBrush. I find it difficult anyway. It's hard to, even just loading an image in the background of ZBrush, they've got a plugin for it now, but it's kind of difficult, and it's not the easiest workflow. You're used to Maya, where you have image planes, or you attach an image to a plane. You can do a front, side, and that really, really aids in your modeling, but you don't necessarily have that as easy in ZBrush. And that's one of those cases where it might be better to block out a mesh in polygons instead of Z-spheres, because if you use Z-spheres, your scale's all wonky and you can't really line stuff up exactly. So there's a reason to not use Z-spheres, certainly. And this neck fat, man, I don't know. I just can't get it. I can't get it to look right. At this stage, it should be nearly done, but it's still kind of giving me trouble. It's too tubey, I'm not even following my own advice here, and I'm trying to push this piece of skin up into this other fatty one, and wasn't really getting the result I liked. But this I'm a little more happy with. In fact, I'm so happy with it, I'm going to repeat that process in multiple areas. And this is pretty indicative of my normal workflow. Once I get all of my shapes blocked out and stuff, and I have all my wrinkles, even though they're pretty close together, I go touch the whole model again. Not necessarily pinching everything together, but I'll use the pinch brush really broad to kind of move things together and smush them around a little bit. I do tend to stick with this shader for the most part. It's my favorite in terms of showing me errors in my mesh, and it doesn't hurt my eyes. It's easy to look at. I feel like it shadows well, and I can always see what I'm doing. But I'll flip-flop a little bit, and I'll use different shaders off and on if I just want to see what something looks like under a different light. I kind of need to actually sit and do part of this horn now, because I've been intentionally avoiding it. And with this model, I don't actually do too much detailing towards the center of the horn, but if you're going to do that, for God's sakes, turn off your symmetry. There's no reason, just turn your symmetry off. You don't have to have the exact same shapes on both sides, and the closer to the center you get, the more awful it's just going to look. It's going to end up having that butterfly effect right in the middle, and it's just not, it's kind of amateurish. It would have taken 2 minutes to kind of just do something a little bit asymmetrical and then turn your symmetry back on. I'm just kind of sharpening these tips a little bit, almost like a saw blade or something. I'm not really sure what it is, but And when I'm doing this type of work, I'm just kind of, some of it's accidental and just random, but other stuff like directional scarring and stuff like that. I mean, you should think about that kind of stuff. If he was hitting stuff or rubbing it on something, you would have pretty specific directional kind of scarring and gouges and stuff like that. So, think about that. Don't just people kind of wuss out and they dive into their alpha library and just do a bunch of random kind of cuts and stuff all over the place, and it just doesn't really look like it belongs. They didn't think at all about how it should be laid out. They just use alphas, and I almost never use ZBrush alphas for anything. Even for the movie Sorcerer's Apprentice is coming out pretty soon, and I did all the sculpting for one of the small dragons, and it's just like a million repetitive dots and all this stuff. But I did it by hand, just because not doing it by hand, it just looked like a bunch of alphas. I mean, it looked okay. I certainly did a test trying to use some alphas and see, does that get me at all where I want to be? And it was okay, but in the end, all the areas I was doing by hand actually just ended up looking a lot better. And you just kind of figure out a process, like, okay, I'm just going to have to do it this way a million times, and you just give yourself enough time to do it. I'm kind of slowly more happy with it at this point. It's kind of getting to where I think it's okay. I'm still toying with the nose and being unhappy with it having so little detail in the front. Really though, I guess now, thinking about it, that would be a good area for just kind of some really generic bumps, because the skin on the nose is exposed skin, and it's kind of porous and bumpy, and all the surrounding area, kind of, if you were thinking about how this guy's built, is kind of more fur and big beefy areas and muscular. The nose is just would be more porous and bumpy and stuff, kind of like concrete almost. We're pretty close to done, actually. Most of what I'm doing now is just kind of concepting and thinking. And I like the idea of the horns being chipped up, I guess. So I'm kind of committing to that now a little bit. The other thing that I do, which is really dumb of me, is I never use layers in ZBrush. I hate the layering system in ZBrush. I never use it. I'll sculpt an entire character head to toe without a single layer, which in a lot of ways is dumb, and I realize it's dumb. It's just that they're so useless to me that I don't consider using them. Mostly because it doesn't keep your layers on a per sub D, or not sub D, on a per division level, So you're constantly deleting them anyway. I mean, I might load one up, and if I'm kind of concepting something and I'm like, I wonder if I would like it if I went down this road, I might make a layer really quick, but for the most part, not so much. And even this stuff, I had symmetry on. I kind of meant to turn it off and I forgot. So now I'm just filling in that hole I made, and I'm going to make the other side look a little bit different. Which is good, it's good. Things aren't symmetrical. Especially if you're going to do something as obvious as like these two giant horns. They shouldn't be broken off the same on both sides. They just shouldn't. It's just one of those things. It's like, drives me nuts in models. It's like a bad hair plug-in on a model. There's so many models I see. It's like, yeah, this would have been a great model if you just would have turned symmetry off for 1 minute. Or I see a great model with like the world's worst hair plug-in on it. Oh, and it just looks awful. It really is important how you present your work, isn't it? I mean, I see a lot of those models with bad hair and stuff, and when you open it up, all you end up actually seeing is bad hair. You don't see that there's actually a nice model underneath that someone spent a lot of time on and actually came out nice. Which isn't the goal. I mean, that's what you should be noticing immediately is how good the model is. Friggin' ZBrush, spotty brushes. It's hard because I want to make a fast stroke and I can't. And by slowing my stroke down, it becomes, I feel much less accurate. I'm more accurate if I'm moving my pen quickly. He's just about done. A couple more minutes, I think we'll be wrapped up. I definitely enjoy doing these videos. I mean, you know, I definitely have been doing this for a while, but the industry changes so often. I can't, you know, I can't stop being an artist. I'm not burnt out with this stuff at all. And I'm always getting better. You know, I'm always trying to get better at what I'm doing. I see artists all the time that I work with and artists that I'm friends with that are, you know, intimidating. They're really good and they do a lot of nice stuff all the time. And it's, for me, it's motivating to be around those people and, you know, steal some ideas of theirs and use it for my own models. But hopefully they steal a little bit from me as well. So I did use a layer for that last little bit. And just toggling it on and off. And then this is kind of the thing I do at the end always. I always move my mesh around more at the very end. And that's definitely a different kind of look. And I'm not necessarily in love with it. It just looks a little too cartoony. I mean, he's kind of stylized anyway. His mouth's a little bit humanoid, I guess. A little bit, but kind of undoing that. I'm just kind of toggling back and forth. I was kind of wanting to make some changes to the chin, but I'm more or less happy with how it actually is, so maybe just some subtle changes is better. That one's not so bad. I was kind of considering giving him a really aggressive grimace, and it just looks too... That just doesn't look realistic enough. I mean, I get it, but it's just not really fitting. I think it's better the way it was originally. And we're kind of done. I mean, that's about it. I'm just noodling with the mouth a little bit. Everything I'm doing now is just kind of for nothing, but for the most part, that is it. I'm always happy to do videos and stuff if people have like specific questions and they want to see me do something. Just shoot me an email and ask.